Hey, Michael Zavella here. I'm a producer mixer from Australia, living in Nashville, and just starting to create these videos to share some of the things I've learned and hopefully hear from you guys on some of the things you learned, and we can all get better together to make better music. The first topic I want to talk about is maintaining perspective throughout the production and the mix, and tips that I've come to implement, or different strategies that I've implemented to try and help that perspective not get in it murky or distracted or led astray throughout the mix. Like, there'd be so many times that I'd have finished a mix and it was done, I sent off, and the track came out, and I listened to the track and I'd go, oh, I wish I just made those drums a little more punchier. I just brought out the transients a little more, or I wish I brought out the top end of the bass a little more to make it clearer. And in those moments, I'm like, easy, I know how to do that. I'll just do this or do that mixing technique to bring it out. But in the moment, I knew those same things too, but for whatever reason, my perspective wasn't showing me those things at the time. And it's not until you are in a different place, or you hear it after a certain amount of time, that those things kind of become clear to you. So the goal is to address those things in the moment, because you don't want to be, you want your songs to be out there and to be the best they can. You don't want to be hearing things and going, oh, I wish I did this, or wish I did this. I know it would have been so much better. But what's hard is, in the moment, if you heard those things, you would have done that. So this is where being able to maintain that perspective throughout the mix is incredibly important. And then some of the ways I go about doing this is, number one, you get to know your volume knob. So often in a mix, I'd be reacting, going over to the right, my volume knob is, I'd be instinctively reaching for that and turning it up or down for whatever reason throughout the mix. Maybe things are too loud, maybe things are too quiet, and instead of addressing it in the mix, I would go to the right and do one click or two clicks until it gets in a better spot. But unbeknownst to me at the time, what I was doing is I was creating an unlevel ground that I was mixing on, because mixing is so much the reaction of not only what you're hearing, but what you're feeling from the mix as well. And by turning it up or down, you're changing that feeling, but you're not changing the mix, you're changing the way you're feeling that mix. So you can often be led astray, or be thinking you're fixing problems by going for the volume knob, but really all you're doing is you may be just distracting yourself from how you should actually be fixing those problems. So for me, I've now got a volume setting that I have learnt I've learnt works really well. For me, it's -21. That's where I keep it at pretty much the whole mix, unless there's a portion where I'm like, okay, let's just see if I turn this up and it'll make the speakers react in a certain way, especially the low end. Sometimes you don't know if it's going to blow the low end out, especially the way the kick and the bass is working, until you've turned it up loud. But otherwise, it's at -21 from the start to the end of the mix. And that just allows me to have a pretty level perspective throughout the mix. I'm reacting to the same volume, so that I know where things should be hitting me at that level. And if it's not hitting me, it's not the volume knob's problem, it's the mixer's problem, and I can address that the way I know how. The other thing that helps with is you get really acquainted with the overall dynamics of a track. You really get to know the density of a track. You get to know how all the elements are working together, because you are very conscious of your peak level, and you're very conscious of the volume level, because they are now what you're controlling. You're not controlling the overall, you're controlling the mix of those two. And I just feel I can internalize that so much better, having being super conscious about where that volume knob is. The next one that's easy to do is gain match in plugins. So when we do anything, whether we EQ, we compress, and we use makeup gain, we distort, we're changing the volume level. So gain match in the front and back of the plugin to make sure that the volume's the same, so you're responding to and making the decision of the actual processing rather than the change in volume is huge. So easy. I mean, maintaining perspective is massive for ending up with a mix that you're happy with. But so often you're just tricking yourself throughout the game by these little changes in volume. So gain matching the front and back of a plugin really allows you to be happy with the processing you're doing, making sure you're not tricking yourself. A lot of plugins will incorporate this into the plugin, which is great, but it's worth doing it on the front and back of plugins just to make sure you're not doing processing that isn't required or that is making the mix sound worse. Another one that's worth keeping in mind is that effects like delays and reverbs also make the source track louder. You're adding volume to the source track, but it is by sending that source track into a delay or into a reverb, which is obviously a complex array of delays done in a certain way to sound like a real room. But these are adding volume to the sound. So just keep that in mind. Reverb adds volume to the original source. So I will often, I've got a control surface, so I will hold the fader of the source, and then on my mouse I will control the level of the effect, and I'll be writing those to kind of make sure the level is similar, but then I can also tell whether the reverb's murkying it up, whether it's actually adding depth, or it's just, like I said, making more mud in there, and the actual depth effect that is being created by that reverb. So just keep that in mind. So reverbs and delays are adding volume, so it's worth factoring that in on your source level. Another one that is great is and you can do this with the control surface as well, like in a similar way as I was just explaining the effects. Hold on to a fader, and maybe, so I'll probably do it in Pro Q3. I will have a broad mid-range, a broad shelf on the top, and a broad shelf on the bottom, especially on vocals, and I'll be controlling the volume via the fader, and I'll be controlling the volume of that frequency range via the mouse. And my goal is to keep the same volume regardless of the EQ changes, so that I can quickly know what the vocal needs, and that I'm not being tricked by the increase in level or decrease in level. So yes, you've got one finger on the fader, and then you've got a finger clicking those shelves or that broad mid-range band, and I'm just trying to level match it. And it's actually quite a quick process to like demo, okay, what does this vocal need? Does it need more top end? Does it need less top end? Does it need more mid-range? And you can also discover what's in that vocal, like what's lacking in that vocal, but also what's special in that vocal by doing that really quickly. Another one is small speakers. So I've got tiny little Grover Nodding speakers that I'm probably spending half of my time on. So I've also got Amphion 218s as my large speakers, but I'm spending about the same amount of time on these tiny little, they're like half the size of an Oratone speaker. And I find that it's just making you focus on the mid-range. It's making you focus on what's important in the mix, what can be heard, but it's also telling you how the low end will affect the low mids and the mid-range, like how they're interacting. Because if that's not working, it will often be sensed not only in the actual low end that's heard on large speakers or on headphones, but it will affect the way and the mid-range is speaking and the clarity in that. So small speakers will just show you that as well. Another one similar to that is iPhone playback. I will often just listen back through iPhone because especially it's wild with vocal tuning. You can think you've made the vocal sound amazing, but listening through an iPhone, I don't know if it's just so pinpointed in the mid-range, you'll hear pitch issues that I didn't hear on either any of my speakers or headphones. It's just that it's such a fine microscope on that region that I'll pick up things in there that you think you would have addressed before, but it's not until you listen through the iPhone, for example, that you can pick those things up, which is not fun. Yeah. That's probably the main things I'm implementing at the moment to maintain perspective. But let me know below. Let me know what you guys do. Let me know if anything's helpful here. It's always good to learn these things. And in this topic, really the thing that I have noticed made me step up my game is not the processing, not learning how to do new processes, not learning fancy ways to do sidechain compression and those sorts of things, because they're just tools. They're just tools in the toolbox. What it is it's your ability to maintain perspective and make those decisions in the mix that need to be made, not once it's out and you can then listen to it and be like, oh, would have been easy. I could have just boosted the low end a little bit and it would have been sick. So it's your ability to maintain perspective in the mix process that helps you notice things and helps you step up your game. So yeah, hope this was helpful. Let me know. Thanks.